Hi, I'm Phil from ShopNotes Magazine, and this is the ShopNotes Podcast. It's episode number 158. John and I are going to be taking the reins on a special summer edition of the podcast, and we're giving a shout out to what's his name. You know who you are. And we'll be talking about learning and teaching, having shop visitors, the concept of persistence, and don't forget to stick around for this week's free plan as well. Thanks for joining us. Let's go.
I like that. Shout out to what's his name, and then that could be really to anybody.
Ready, yeah.
And then they're like, oh, wow, they gave me a shout out. That's cool.
They're really caring people over at the ShopNotes Podcast.
I knew they remember me.
We had a visitor earlier this week into the shop, Chris Hathaway, fan of the show, stopped in, and it's always fun to have people around here. It's I wasn't here that day, but he was genuinely enthusiastic about being able to see behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they watched the podcast and the Facebook Live, and so they've seen different parts of our office and studio and shop and different things. So now that they've been here, they can kind of lay it out in their minds, the goings on here, and kind of see behind the scenes. So yeah. It's always cool to share that.
Right. So if you are interested in visiting and touring the Woodsmith and ShopNotes global headquarters, you can feel free to do that. We would love to have you and show you around. What's unusual about Woodsmith and ShopNotes is that we do it all here. We have a full staff of designers and illustrators, and we do all of our own photography. We have the projects built in the shop. We do our own videos and stuff, and it's all remarkably contained into one building now. Mm-hmm. And you can see kind of the goings on. Because where I am, if you're watching this on the radio on YouTube, is I'm sitting at I guess I would call it my office, but it's a quad pack of cubicles that I share with John and Becky and Logan, kind of in this area. And where I'm facing is our video and TV studio. So it's all right here.
Yep. Yeah, we don't want to forget that the Popular Woodworking headquarters is right there too. It's basically right over your left shoulder is Logan's cubicle.
Yeah.
And that's the entirety of the headquarters.
Yeah.
The world headquarters of Popular Woodworking.
Popular Woodworking. Yeah. Yeah, they rent space from us.
Yeah. So they crash on our couch, basically.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And we actually have a futon here, so maybe we just do like spend the night at Woodsmith kind of thing.
There you go. Summer camp.
Right.
This is happening. Craft time, 4 hours today, guys.
Yeah.
Buckle
so if you come for a visit, just because of people working from home and our different schedules, it's always best if you shoot us an email to let us know when you plan on attending, so that we know that we can have somebody here. There's a handful of us that are here all the time, John and I among those, but still just knowing when to look out for people. And when you're here, you'll be able to look for little Easter eggs, like finding out like what's going on behind me, or what's the deal with that chili pepper thing going on over John's shoulder, and where is that? Right. Who knows?
Yeah, it's a scavenger hunt.
Yeah, it is.
So. Yeah, I knew Chris was coming around 10, and I was looking for him, and I still didn't hear him knocking at the door. So apparently he went and rapped at the window of customer service, and they let him in. So yes, right. Give us a heads up so we know we're coming. We need to get a doorbell or something.
Maybe
get a ring doorbell.
That'd be cool.
So
that'd be fun.
Yeah.
So anyway, especially since we haven't been able to restart the Woodsmith workshop live event that we did a few years ago in the before times. We're trying to figure out ways of how we can get folk to come see what we do, because it's pretty cool. We have a pretty creative group of people that do an amazing variety of things here. Like, for example, we're getting ready for one of our Woodsmith Live seminars. So Becky is scurrying around transforming the video set into a seminar studio. Dylan's putting the final finishing touches on his presentation. And as soon as we're done here, John's is going to help out with the seminar and finish designing projects that need to get turned into plans so that Steve and Mark can turn them into actual projects. And
that's right. Trying to keep everybody happy.
Yep. Some days it feels like we're in the very middle of a complex domino project that's getting put together, and we're at the point where we can't touch any of the dominoes yet. We have to wait.
Yep.
Because you don't want to prematurely start tipping over dominoes.
Yeah, that's bad. Very bad.
So anyway, last week in the shop, we had a guest for the TV show, Shar Miller King, which was cool because unlike other people, she actually showed up to be a special guest.
That's the requirement for being a guest, basically, on the Woodsmith Shop, is if you show up, you're in.
You're our favorite.
Yeah. You're the best.
Yeah.
So,
shout out to what's his name.
Yeah. You know who we're talking about. Could be anybody.
Yeah. What was interesting having Shar in is that she has a very strong passion for teaching woodworking. She's involved in a couple of groups in the Atlanta area and has done quite a few things with kids, getting kids involved in woodworking. And it made me think about, fundamentally, I view both Woodsmith and ShopNotes as being educational in their nature. So I was wondering, for you, John, what were some of the early woodworking lessons that you learned that have stuck with you?
Don't mess with my dad's tools. And leave them out in the rain or in the treehouse. It's funny because I remember making a playhouse, treehouse type thing with my dad when I'm my kids' ages now. And you guys make fun of me because I use way too many screws in projects. And so we were working nights, weekends, whatever, working on this. And I would just be bored during the day. So I would just go drive screws or nails into because that was a fun thing to do. So it was just way too many screws and nails. So maybe I picked that up as
maybe that's where that is.
Thing. Yeah. This is
I don't
therapy here.
I don't know that we make fun of you as it's awe, I think is what you're maybe confusing that with.
Yes, that's true. How does he do it?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But so that's, I guess, some stuff I can remember early on.
Okay.
But
what about when you started here at Woodsmith? I mean, because you had worked in a cabinet shop before coming here, but obviously working here is very different from working in a commercial cabinet shop.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like when I started here, I knew what I was doing, but then it was very intimidating being around everyone because then it was I don't know what I'm doing. So it's very just intimidating of the guys in the shop watching you or looking over. So they're probably not caring anything I'm doing, but it's
right.
And yeah, so just being around all of the woodworkers we've had here, and most of them have been here 10, 15, 20 years at that point. And it's just a good resource of learning from different people and how other people do things as far as building techniques and design and that kind of thing. I think where it really took off for me is when I started on the TV show, season 2. So would have been 15 years ago, I guess.
Yeah.
We'll say.
Yeah.
And I was kind of forced at that point because we're building projects from the magazine that were, had been built for the magazine, so designed and built by other people. So I was forced to, at that point, build things the way other people designed it, because I think starting out, you do the things that you're comfortable with.
Sure.
So I like design around joinery I'm comfortable with, or build projects the way I'm comfortable with. But that forced me to do it the way other people have done it. So you're doing different joinery techniques, or building different jigs, or using different tools, maybe outside of my wheelhouse, I guess.
Okay.
So just 15 years of that, I guess, of building projects from plans that other people have designed, and building with other people. It's kind of where I probably learned the most, I guess.
Yeah.
At least picked up the learning curve that way. So
No, I can see that, because you're really forced to kind of get into somebody else's head as to why they're doing something, both like why they're doing a particular operation on its own, and where that operation fits in the process. Because we were talking about this with Shar too, where it was, there's been plenty of times when we're in the middle of shooting a show and we get to a step and it's like, why are we doing it here this way now? Like, it just doesn't make sense. So then we change it up on the fly because we're in a hurry, do something different, and then like 3 steps down the line, the light bulb goes off. Oh, that's why.
Yep. So yeah, we're still learning. We're not there yet. It's a journey.
It is a journey. I think that's kind of the fun part of it, is figuring that out. But then also, one of the things for me was I really wanted, when I started here, I knew that I knew some woodworking, but it wasn't until I was in the shop a few times where I realized that I didn't know what I didn't know about woodworking, and that there was a lot of it. And I would go down there and work on my own projects, or just practice techniques or something like that. And there were times when I wanted help from other people, and then there were plenty of times where I just kind of wanted to be invisible, just doing it myself. Like, I just got to figure it out. And it's got to struggle. It's going to look terrible from the outside, but trying to balance that, having somebody help you or looking over your shoulder versus just fighting it out.
Right. Yeah. And it was always tough too, when like just being intimidated in the shop, because it was always busy. It was always full. There's always people working. It's like, I just want to come in at night and just work without anybody watching me. And
yeah,
because the biggest fear is like, pick up a tool to do something, like they'd be like, what are you doing? Like, I don't know. What am I doing? You tell me.
Right. And the funny part is, like you said, it was always busy. And so clearly people had work to do down there. But it felt like every time you stopped and turned around, there was always somebody like watching you. Just like, That's how you do that, huh?
Yeah. But on the other hand, there were some lifelong woodworkers in there that would do things, particularly on maybe a table saw, that I would never do and would never wish anyone to do. And it worked for them, as far as I know, but it's just like, I question that.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's definitely true, that you would see different techniques, alternate modes of construction and things like that may or may not be recommendable.
Like even I know better than that. And I don't know much better about anything. So
yeah. So that's true. There is definitely that too. Being in a shop where there are so many different woodworkers, being able to see both how they do things and then learning a little bit why. I also got to the point for a while where you just kind of roll with it, of you're in a fishbowl of woodworking, and just start asking questions or asking for advice, even if you're kind of in a place where you don't really want to or care to know what the answer is.
Yeah.
Just kind of forcing yourself to learn that way.
Yeah. Yeah, because for the most part, everybody is in the shop is very helpful and
Oh, yeah.
willing to answer questions and go into great, extensive answers on things and even show you. And so,
Right.
yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, and then you picked up there were different people in the shop that had different experiences or different levels of expertise. I think of like Kent Welsh. I feel like I learned more about finishing from than anybody else.
Yeah.
Just because he was very invested in that process, no matter what he was doing.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the other thing. Like, he would, particularly finishing, would do things that I would never even think of. Like, push the boundaries of different types of paints and finishes and stuff. So, yeah. So there's, many people that have a wealth of knowledge on things that it's just like, I wouldn't even think to search for this. And you get exposed to it daily here. So,
yeah.
But, yeah. Yeah. That's the other thing you were saying, Shar, being here last week and teaching kids. Since I have kids, that's my thing. My daughter, my 9-year-old, almost 10-year-old, came in and worked with Shar. And it's always interesting working with kids or beginners because they ask questions that you never think of. And you're like, oh, and then you kind of explain, why you do things. And it's like, yeah, I never thought of it that way. And so you're also kind of learning or relearning things about woodworking that you probably haven't thought of in a while. Working with beginners. So
yeah, things that have turned second nature on it. And
yeah.
What was interesting is Shar asked really good questions about teaching because she was asking us about how we teach people woodworking things, and it's almost like teaching your kids how to drive, where it's just all this stuff that you do sort of reflexively or that you've just kind of trained yourself into doing and now having to stop, like you said, and think about, now, why is it that I do that way? Or how would I talk about things?
Yeah. Yeah. Very much like riding a bike. It's like, how do you teach someone to ride a bike? It's just like, just balance and pedal and go. Just do it.
Yeah.
I don't know. We all learn, but
right.
Yeah. So some of it's just getting out and doing it. But yeah, there is a lot of questions that we don't think about and then kind of reflect on that and answer them and learn with them. So yeah, and I was really impressed with my daughter, Millie. She was way more interested in it than I've probably given her credit at home. Because usually when I'm doing things, it's like I just want to get it done and it's like get out of my way and stay out of, where it's like, oh, maybe I should slow down and kind of nurture their interests when they're in the shop and maybe build some projects that she wants to build. So
yeah,
might do that in the future.
I also wonder if there's a difference that it was a different adult
right
doing it, and you're not preloaded with the parent-child,
right,
dad-daughter, father-son kind of thing.
Yeah,
that can make a teaching environment a little bit more fraught.
Yeah. Yeah, I've found that anytime I've had to volunteer for teaching my kids or coaching my kids, it's usually that they're the least receptive on being taught by a parent but if it came from anyone else, that's great knowledge, but
yeah,
very, more with parents, it seems like they're kind of put up the walls.
Right.
So.
Well, and that's like we pre-push our buttons too. Like, I know exactly what my kid's going to do to drive me crazy.
Right.
And the kid is the same way too, so.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's an interesting journey.
It is.
I've also discovered that there's a certain level of persistence required in learning woodworking. Like you just have to fight your way through something. And, I was thinking of two examples. One recently that I had talked about was we've always shown in Woodsmith the mortising technique of drilling out a mortise at the drill press and then cleaning it up with a chisel. And I just never understood why that was a thing, because to me it was always, to me that was like the best way of saying, how can I create random sized mortises? And then it was, I just had to do it a bunch of times to figure it out. And then I kind of figured out a way that made sense to me and helped me understand the whole process.
Yeah. Yeah, coming from an engineering background and doing all the design work in a computer where everything's perfect and uniform and easy.
Fits.
That was, very like hard thing to learn as far as being more free flow, I guess. It's like, how do I make everything repeatable and exact? And so it's like, got to use power tools with exact bits and jigs and all that thing. And then you kind of learn as you go that it's not going to be perfect no matter how much you try, and just how to deal with that, I guess.
Yeah.
That's another thing. Yeah, so that, I guess that leading into another thing that I kind of learned being exposed to everyone here. I was very much like everything power tool before I was here and working with other people in the shop. And then I think I learned more about hand tools and how they can kind of complement power tools, I guess. Because it was
Okay.
like, oh, this is an 1/8 inch off. I've got to use a power sander or something to get it. It was like, I guess not an 1/8 inch off, but it's like, I don't have to use a palm sander. I can use a scraper or a hand plane or, that kind of thing, where it's, instead of taking a half hour of sanding, you can
Right.
do a couple, passes with the hand tool and get it close and then sand. And so just being exposed to, more techniques, more tools, all those things. So a lot of things that I probably would not have gone out and bought myself, and we just have as a tool library here that I get to try things out on, has been a learning process as well.
Yeah.
So
I think all that to say is, like, get involved in some woodworking classes where you can learn something from somebody else who maybe does it a different way. And I try to want to get that across in the magazine, like fully knowing that all the woodworkers aren't here in the Woodsmith shop or have the ability that we do to learn from all the people in the shop experientially. How do we reflect that in the magazine in how we describe how a project gets put together or a specific technique and things like that. So
yeah, I hope like people that read the magazine aren't confused, because we'll show from one project in the same issue or from issue to issue different ways to do the same thing, and we're more doing it to give you options, I guess, than say, because I don't know, you could come in and say this is the only way to make a mortise, and we show it
Right.
that way every single time, and I don't know, that would get kind of boring and you wouldn't maybe learn much, or maybe that just doesn't work with the tools that you have at home. So I don't know, we try to show it different ways, and one way might not be better than another, or maybe one way is better for you and your shop, and you can just go with that. And so
Yeah. That's something that I've noticed since Mark Hopkins has been here, our English woodworker, is how when he approaches a particular project, he has he uses a router to do a lot of things that in the past, like Steve and both Steve Johnson and Steve Curtis before him would have tried to do at the table saw. That there was a very table saw centric mindset on doing things. And Mark does a lot of stuff with a router in terms of creating one-off patterns or jigs or something like that in order to accomplish a specific goal in putting together a project, which is pretty impressive to me.
Yeah. I feel like I was kind of the same way starting out. I had a router. I think a router was one of my first kind of woodworking power tools before I had a table saw. I had like a chop saw and a router, and learned all kinds of things to do with the router, make joinery or cut out circles and all kinds of mortise and tenons and all kinds of things you can do.
No, that's definitely true, because I remember watching you doing that in preparing props in between scenes for the TV show. That you would think of something, and I immediately thought, well, I just need to do blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, you're grabbing a couple of pieces of plywood and double-sided tape and put a flush trim bit in a router, and bam, there it is.
Yep.
It's like, oh, yeah, I guess you could do it that way too. And dang, that looks really nice. Good work.
Yeah, I remember starting out like double-sided. It took me a long time to trust double-sided tape, like double-sided tape and clamps, because it's like this tape's not gonna hold. Like it's totally gonna move or come off, and then it went from that to like I've got to use a whole roll of double-sided tape to hold this down, and then it's like, well, now that's too much, and then so it's now like two little squares, and trust that.
Yeah,
and then now it's two track saws that are just like kind of held down by friction. That's
or magic or whatever.
That's my next trust thing. It's like, I don't really trust this, but I'm going to do it, and it works. So,
yeah.
But
no, that's definitely. Speaking of routers, last podcast I was talking about finally moving on from my trying to come up with a router-based slot mortising machine. Chris had come up with one a few years ago for the magazine that I really liked, except for the fact that it was pretty big for what I would need in my shop. So I was trying to come up with a smaller, simpler version and fought with it for a couple of years. And I eventually, as I talked about last time, just gave up on that idea and then did the mashup of several mortising jigs that we've done in the magazines, primarily in ShopNotes, and came up with a few ideas. So one of the things that I've learned in different router jigs that I've made is using guide bushings to control the movement of a router. And I've come to favor like a 1-inch diameter guide bushing, just because it makes the math a little bit easier in terms of calculating offsets. So rather than plowing some kind of a channel in the top of the router jig like we've shown to match the base plate of a specific router, I just have a 1-inch slot for the guide bushing, which for me simplified the construction of it. But then also I was using, with a 1-inch guide bushing, that means it doesn't matter what router I'm using at the time. So if I'm doing small mortises, small width mortises, I can just put the guide bushing in my little palm router with a plunge base, and there I go. I'm ready to go. For larger ones, I can use my bigger 690 router with a plunge base on it, and it's the guide bushing that's taking care of it. So simplified it that way, added some T-track to the front face to control where pieces are going to go. I'll put a bunch of photos of this on our show notes page at shopnotes.com/podcast. You'll be able to see photos of what mine looked like. And then I painted it, because having some stuff painted in your shop and adding a little color is nice to break up all the tans and browns going on.
Yep. I like the nice gray laminate, my favorite color. So
true. That it
makes it pop.
Right. North Sea gray. Now, one thing, another bit of old business from the last podcast is you were supposed to be on that podcast, but you weren't.
I wasn't.
Yeah.
Had a drain emergency, and I
Right.
did survive. So I think that's how, like, my parents listen to the podcast, and I think that's like, hey, what they called me, like, hey, what's going on? They mentioned you in the podcast. So no, I just had the basement drain back up for some odd reason, and had Roto-Rooter come out and couldn't find a cause to it, and it was like we were trying to get the drain off, and he just poked his screwdriver down into the drain and just went and emptied. And it's like, okay, well, that solved that. So it might have been like the equivalent of calling an electrician to your house, and they're like, oh, it's this GFI switch. Click.
Click. Yeah.
Fixed it. So I don't know. We'll see if that ever happens again, or what the cause was, or one of the kids flushed something down the toilet and it temporarily clogged it and backed up. I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we had gotten a bunch of rain around in that time too, so I had thought it was maybe stormwater.
That's what I thought too. It was like we just had a big rain that morning, and I don't know. Everything else seemed clear, and I don't know. It's odd.
Yeah.
One of those house things, but yeah, not being in that house that long, it was a good chance to like find where the sump pump was and the clean out and all that stuff. And now I know.
Right.
So I'm ready. I'm ready for the next one. Bring it on.
Are you ready though?
No.
Probably not. Yeah.
So
if you found like all the places in your house where it's, what's this wall switch do?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I remember the first time like all the smoke detectors are connected in the house, and they were all going off for some odd reason. It's like finding where the breakers are and that kind of thing. Because like in my old house, I lived there 18 years. I redone every single thing. I knew where everything was and understood everything. And just being in a different house, it's like, what does this switch do? There is like one switch that I don't know what it does yet. I'm thinking it's an outlet switch to something, but I haven't gone to the trouble of testing it. So that'll be the next project, I guess.
Yeah.
Going around and plugging things in, testing the switch, and so.
Now you guys didn't build that house, but it's a relatively newer house. Do you have, and this is something I found in newer houses, it seems like there's a couple of walls in the house where there's like 4 switches in a row. Mm-hmm. Do you have that? And it's like, what's that one? What's that one? What's that one?
Because it's kind of an open concept on the main floor. So yeah, it's very much like knowing which switch goes to like what light or fan, and it's like remembering the order. But there is still a lot of like hitting the different switches to get what light you want on or off, or so it's hard to remember.
Yeah.
So, and like I was telling you, we were having problems with our refrigerator and looking at refrigerators and then like talking about counter depth fridges or full depth, and like, I don't know, it's fine. Then I look and there's the fridge like cutout is set back. So that means there's like a 12-inch behind the rest of the cabinets on that wall. There would be like a 12-inch gap in the walls somewhere because the wall behind it is flat. It's like, now I've got to investigate that. And what's in this?
You might have a secret compartment.
This little house archaeology or something.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where the Ark of the Covenant is. Or
Maybe.
the Holy Grail.
Mm-hmm.
Got to cut a hole in the wall now.
Yep.
So.
Or it's some kind of like Edgar Allan Poe, like Cask of Amontillado. There's somebody kind of walled up in there.
Yeah. Because that was the other thing, moving into a house that's not that old. It's like, the old house is like, I was cutting out walls and taking out drywall, and it's like, who cares? And now it's like, oh, I can't touch anything. I can't. Like, this is all new. But now getting to the point, it's like, I don't care. I'll cut a hole in the drywall.
Yeah.
You can always patch drywall. That's not a big deal. You can always paint it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yep. Just make it your own.
Yep.
All right. The free plan for this episode is related to an upcoming TV show episode that we're doing with Shar Miller King. It's a set of stacking bookcases that was in Popular Woodworking magazine. Yes, there are times when we feel that Popular Woodworking has contributed quality projects. This is one of them. And stacking bookcases are part of their I Can Do That series that use relatively simple techniques in joinery and materials in order to build good-looking projects. And that's a pretty cool series that they've had for quite a number of years. And this one was modeled after a set of bookshelves that were in the same issue, modeled after the ones found in Thomas Jefferson's Monticello estate, but this in a simpler style. So we're going to show how to do that on the TV show in several different joinery configurations, but you can find the plans on our YouTube channel, where you can watch the podcast, as well as on the show notes page that you'll find at shopnotes.com/podcasts. If you have any questions, comments, or smart remarks, we want to hear about them, or any other fun stories of learning about woodworking or discovering and uncovering the mysteries of your own home. Like John did, you can leave those in the comment section or shoot us an email, woodsmith@woodsmith.com. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Bye.